We'll call the meeting to order. Ashburnham Board of Selectmen. It is March 15th, 2021. It's a virtual Zoom meeting being recorded. All votes will be taken by roll call. Can I have an approval of the agenda?
So moved.
I'll second that.
All in favor, Leo Jansen, yes.
Rosemary Meisner, yes.
Bill Johnson, yes.
All right. Do we have anybody in attendance tonight that would like to address the board on anything not on the agenda? All right, seeing nothing, we will move right into the town administrator's update.
Chairman, thank you. So we're still, town hall is still closed because COVID, but the numbers still are in town, kind of steady at the low end, but they're still here. Hopefully we'll be able to open soon. We're preparing for that. So kind of on that note, today's the last day for motor vehicle excise. They were all due today. And for me, that's a key indicator of where our local receipts are. We'll see how healthy the local population is on paying their excise tax. That's a good benchmark for where we are going forward. And I'll use that to rely on next year's projections. So the past week, since the last meeting, we had the second MVP meeting, which is the vulnerability preparedness. And that was more of a follow-up from the first meeting. It went well. So the next step will be Power will do a draft report. We'll take a look at that. Then after that, they'll do a public comment and they'll put it out. That'll be in the evening for a public comment type thing. And then once that's completed, they'll do a final report. So also that's been happening is the marijuana review team got together. Eddie's Flowers has an application in. We reviewed their application. We asked for a little bit more documentation before we move them forward to a host agreement. So they're getting that information to move forward with that. Also Green Ventures, they reached out for to the state for a waiver for the community outreach meeting because their last one because of COVID was so long ago. And the state did not give them a waiver, so they'll have to do another community outreach meeting. I believe it's scheduled for the end of this month or the 1st of April. I also met with the Water and Sewer Committee regarding their FY22 budget, and they were comfortable with the numbers that we have, and we're going to move the budget forward from those two departments or enterprises. So the last thing I want to mention, and if there's any questions, I have Interim Fire Chief Bob Plant here. We're going to do an auction for 3 of the trucks down at the fire department. None of the trucks are roadworthy, and one of them is engine 2, and that has frame rails rotted out and some older equipment on there, and it would be around $70,000 to repair that. So we're going to auction that one off. The next one we have is the old ladder truck. The engine 2 was a 1998 truck. The next one we have, number 2, is ladder. It's a 1983 ladder truck. The cab mounts and the hydraulics are gone on that. And we know we've been trying to replace that through some of the grant applications. But we're gonna move and put that one out for auction to see if anyone wants to buy that. And the third piece is a Chevy. It's a forestry, well, we call it a forestry truck. It's a 1984 and it's not in service. So those are the 3 trucks that we're going to put out to auction. And that's it for the town administrator report. Does anyone have any questions on anything I've spoke about?
Yes, don't we need to keep the ladder truck till we know if we get the grant or not?
As long as we have it while the grant, prior to the grant being submitted. So we have to say, yes, at the time of submission, we do own a ladder truck because they will replace, but they will not give us a new one if we've never owned one before, or if we have owned one before, I should say. If we've never owned one, then that still qualifies us. But yeah, so once we submit it and that grant was submitted on February 12th, then we can do what we need to do with it. As long as we show that it was not repaired, put in service, or sold to another department for their use. We have to say it's out of service and not usable.
Okay.
I have a question, Bob. What if we don't get the grant and we apply for it next round? What happens if we don't have a truck?
Well, we wouldn't be able to, is the short answer, but this is the fourth attempt in a row trying to get a ladder truck off of that grant. So I think the message is probably pretty clear that for whatever reasons, and they don't give them to you, we don't meet the criteria through AFG. So we could try for something else at that point.
Okay, thank you.
Bill, do you have anything?
I have a question of the chief, not on any of the three trucks that were talked about. And I already know what the answer to this is, but I feel compelled to ask the question. What are we going to do with that $1.50 federal troop transport that's out there in the scrap pile?
That, once we get all the other stuff out of the way, we want to pull that out. There's a forestry, there's a skid unit with a tank on the back. We want to pull that off. That is part of the federal surplus program. What the feds want from the state of Massachusetts is an inventory of from every city and town that has them. Massachusetts has not provided that. Once they get the inventory, then all of these trucks statewide can either be scrapped or sold or whatever the feds determine. Right now, it's being handled by I think the District 10 Forest Warden. It's been a problem for years. The Mass Fire Chiefs had an idea that maybe we'll tow them all down and drop them in his parking lot one day. We were deterred from that. So this is a statewide issue, and it's just jammed up with it. I would love to find a place that's a little more secluded, so it's not the eyesore that it is.
So I have a suggestion for you. Rent a tow truck and tow it up to the transfer station.
You
And
got my vote.
Park it up there, get
Yep.
it out of the way. Because look, like I said, I knew what the answer was going to be, and I know it's not your fault or Brian's or anybody else's. It just looks like hell there. So, if people want to go up to the transfer station, the 100 people that go up there, they can look at it. I don't care what it costs. I just think we need to get that out of there and move on. And then whenever that gets wrapped up, then, they know where it is. So
And I
that's a
fully agree.
suggestion.
No, it's an excellent one, and that's one of the reasons. As soon as my first opportunity, I want to get the non-functioning vehicles out of there. So, and that's one of them. It's just the other ones we can auction, and that one we're still stuck with. But I'll chase that down a little more.
Thank you.
Time permits.
Okay. Now we have a presentation from People's GIS, and it's Kevin Flanders. And I do see Kevin here. If you want to unmute yourself, Kevin, I'll turn it over to you.
I don't necessarily have a presentation. I believe I'm here to answer questions about the town's thoughts on how to proceed with asset management and public involvement.
Okay. Then Bill, I'm going to go back to you because I know you've got some background in this.
Well, yeah, thanks, Leo. So I had the opportunity to speak with Kevin a week or so ago when I found out that the town, had his program and that we were using it. So I think, as I told you, Kevin, we had a presentation from C-Click-Fix, and at the time, because I didn't know that your program was in existence, we were looking to make some, I don't know if we is the right answer. I was looking to find out what was available out there that we could possibly get an additional communication tool as it relates to the public. So, and you and I had spoken about what we thought the next step would be based on how we've been utilizing the program to date. So what I'd like to have you do is to kind of tell people exactly what we have, how we've been utilizing it, advantages, disadvantages, and then reiterate what you think the next steps would be. And basically, how does your program compare to what we're looking at C-Click-Fix?
Sure. Well, I think your Public Works Department has been using our software for a little over a year and a half now. They started in a very common location. They focused on documenting and executing work orders. And so this helps a department kind of launch their public works effort, where they can get their arms around what it takes to use computer technology to document what they historically have been doing just with word of mouth and paper if they were lucky, actually. And so they've been doing a very good job of that. I was able to review their history over the last year or so. They're documenting about 1,000 work orders a year, which for the size of your community is really just about right. You know, I compare you're a little smaller than Sudbury, Massachusetts. And I bring Sudbury up because they've been using our work orders for 10, 11 years now. And boy, they're about 2,000 a year, but they're a little more than twice your size. So, so I think that they've done a very nice job of acclimating to that technology and bringing it together. There are several steps that follow, and your department has reached out to me to talk about those steps. Everyone has heard about GIS, Geographical Information Systems, and your community, your Public Works has started on that. There is mapping to our work orders, and we have your addresses in there as point layer, and they're able to map their work orders that way using address. But really what the next step is to map all of your assets so that your Public Works Department is not only being able to map and react to work orders by address, but they can also start to map work orders by asset so that every asset has a history of the work conducted on it. My understanding is that there has been mapping done for, I believe, I can't remember now which systems, but you have water and sewer and stormwater and pavement and signs and ramps and sidewalks. These are all of the asset layers that really need to now get mapped so that now Public Works can take care of those assets at a much higher level than and a much more documented level than they have in the past. And that's really their next steps. The See-Click Fix component, we've integrated with See-Click Fix in a few of our communities. They tend to specialize on public involvement in a public works operation where the public can use their phones or tablets, and they can go outside and walk around, and they can find issues and report them. And this kind of hit the scene several years ago. Came out of Boston under Mayor Menino and became very popular really quickly because there was a ton of grant money thrown around inside the 495 belt. But what did happen is that there were a lot of smaller communities, especially, that got a little bit run over. Now, you know, See-Click Fix isn't going to appreciate that comment, so I really want to be careful because I think what they do well. But if a Public Works Department is not fully prepared, they can find themselves a bit outgunned. So for example, your entire Public Works Department isn't using tablets in the field yet. And so they're really not, they won't have the same level of technology as the public may. And so there may just be a few things out of order here. When I heard that this was coming in, I've been in this situation many times. Public Works Departments reaching out to us, they're getting inundated with these See-Click Fix issues, and they're just not ready for it. And so what I recommend is that the Public Works Department, first of all, understand that in the years to come, public involvement is going to be there. There's no getting around that. But it's getting your Public Works Department more prepared for it, getting them more technology, tablets in their vehicles so that when they're in the field, they have access to the data in a more live manner, getting their assets mapped so that they can actually interact with those assets when a member of the public complains about a manhole or catch basin or a fire hydrant. And getting them more used to using those tablets in the field. And then I think a technology like that can come into play and the department's ready for it. I did also tell Public Works that there is a service request component to our software that they have already. And that is really, they're not really using that to its fullest. And I understand why, but that's where you put incoming phone calls and emails and what have you. It's a place where you put requests that come from the public to be vetted. You don't turn them into a work order until they're real. It's amazing how people will call and they want you to take a dead tree down, and you get there and the tree's in their backyard. And so it's not really the town's responsibility. So that belongs at the service request level. And I did tell the Public Works Department that they could take a simplified version of that and put it into their website, on the town's website, on the DPW page, and use that for the public to come and enter their service requests. And I would limit the number of things in the first year that, pick from a list of things that could be reported, and then have that list grow over time as your Public Works Department gets used to responding to them digitally. You're asking people that, to go from paper to responding at the speed of sound overnight. And I think that that's where you get a little bit of that response. And it just takes a little bit of planning. I think your Public Works Department is going to be at that fully interactive stage in a while, but my recommendation was to take some other steps first.
Evan, another question I would have that I was looking for is about reporting capabilities.
Sure.
So with what we have right now, what types of reporting capabilities does the DPW have?
You can report on all of your work orders or over a period of time. You can break your work orders down into categories. So what we call them tasks. So your Public Works created a number of tasks by division in Public Works. So whether they were drainage related or water related or what have you, you have your different divisions. And when you create a work order, you pick a division and then you pick a task, whether that be to paint a hydrant or repair a hydrant or what have you. You can now report on any one of those or group of tasks that you want for any period of time that you want. Now, remember our conversation where you were a little surprised at this as you discovered the reporting capabilities that they already have. And the comment was that your Public Works Department doesn't really advertise them very well. Well, you just described, I've been doing this for 35 years. You just described every Public Works Department I ever worked with. They are terrible at it. And the consumer is sitting there wondering, what are you all doing? And they have the ability to do it. They just don't have careers that line up saying, look at what we do. It's just not who they are. And so I think that they really need to do that. They need to take the software, generate these reports, summarize them, put them in your annual town report so that the average taxpayer can see what they're getting for their dollar. And for them to document 1,000 work orders in a year for a community with 5,000 people in it, I got to tell you, they get an A or an A- from me on that. That's pretty darn good work. It's just nobody knows about it.
Well, that's something that I've been pushing for. DPW gets probably more complaints than any other department we have. Steve will tell you that. It's just the nature of the beast. So when I have people coming up to me telling me they're useless, they're this, they're that, I want to be able to defend them, but I got to know what they're doing. So what I would like to see is just a basic weekly or bi-weekly report that we cut brush on Main Street, we did hydrants in South Ashburnham, we did potholes in North Ashburnham. So when people complain, I can tell them, take a ride up such and such a street, and you're going to see evidence of work that they've been doing. They're not just out hiding. So does it give like a not an in-depth report. I mean, I don't care if 50 tons of salt was used or blacktop was used, but just that they were in a certain location doing certain tasks.
So certainly if your work orders are by address, you know, someone complained at this address, then we have those locations. And once you get your assets mapped, let's say that you do 100 work orders involving hydrants for the year, okay? If your hydrants were mapped and we worked on those hydrants, we would have those locations as well. We won't until we map the assets. Another reason why we've got to get these assets mapped, not the least of which it also gives you an inventory of all that you have. And so it's very important. And then you mentioned some neighborhoods, I think. You were throwing out some neighborhood names.
Yes.
That's a very common thing of late. Just a year and a half ago, our towns came to us and they wanted to be able to summarize their work orders. I think for the most part, for these kind of monthly reports on TV or what have you, and they wanted to be able to summarize them by neighborhood. So we've enabled that. So if Ashburnham were to create a polygon layer of their neighborhoods, think of it as an overlay on your town, and each of those polygons has a neighborhood name. We could actually then add a new report to your list of reports that would break it down by neighborhood. So as long as these work orders are linked to a mapped asset or to an address, then we have a tremendous amount of ability to break the data down in all of those ways that we just discussed. Does that make sense? Is that clear enough?
Yep. And I got another question on the mapping. There's a grant that's been applied for to do some mapping on town infrastructure. Does this program, I don't know if I'm using the right phrase, interact with other mapping programs or coordinate with each other?
Let's take a different perspective on that, okay? Because the answer, unfortunately, in my world is yes and no. And so, but it's quick to explain. So the data format for mapping has become quite interchangeable from one software to another. So 30 years ago, 20 years ago, this was problematic in my industry, and it isn't anymore. So the answer to your question is yes. The layers that we interact with and all the others, we can interchange with all of them without much issue at all. And so that's never a problem. However, a little bit of what you're talking about is something for us to discuss, because everyone knows GPS, right? Where you can map with global positioning systems.
Mm-hmm.
And what our clients are doing today, they're doing a lot more mapping in-house, or they're doing a lot of mapping with, say, high school, college interns, a lot of summer activity in this regards. And so we've seen a lot of this. And we built our mapping software called Quick Asset. We built it so that it would talk to the GPS unit that you're carrying, and you can map these hydrants and these assets in the field, depending on the GPS unit you get. But the one we highly recommend for engineers will map that hydrant, the base of that hydrant, to within centimeters, X, Y, and Z, and doing it in seconds. And when you map it with your device and you've got a tablet connected to it with our software on, it goes right into our software without any additional effort. I could map it and then inspect it a minute later. And I've talked to your public works department about it. They've asked me, what are our next steps? And you're kind of asking me that here too. And boy, either sharing a piece of equipment like that with another town, or a lot of RPCs have this equipment for their member towns, or getting one for your town so you can get that mapped. There's a lot of consultants that'll line up to do it for you. But if you asked me, if I were running the place, what would I do? I'd get one of those units and I'd map it. And now you have so much more data to work with to give the public and town management what they're looking for data.
What's the cost of that device?
That device, it's not cheap, but it's somewhere around $8,000 for that device. It's the lowest end of survey grade GPS. Surveyors wouldn't use it. They like equipment in the $25,000 range because their work is at a higher level. I need it within an inch, couple centimeters, X, Y, and Z. I can do engineering there. I'm a civil engineer by training. And so that gives me what I need for slopes of pipes between manholes, the whole bit. And so for me, that's what we recommend to our clients. That equipment, when I started in the business, was 50 grand. It's down to 8. And I would say 70%, 80% of our public works departments have it. And that's what they've used to get their assets mapped.
Does that also help the dig-safe people when they map something out?
So the dig-safe people, they are using equipment like that when they come out on the field. They're given coordinates, and then they use that equipment to find where those coordinates are on your pavement, and they spray paint. And so they're using very similar stuff. Yes, they've got to be using that level of accuracy because for them to be a few feet off would not be acceptable. So I suspect they're using very similar equipment.
I guess my question more was if we had the equipment and mapped something out, could that information then be used by the dig-safe people?
Well, that's an interesting question. You know, are they even going to use your information if they don't have quality control over how it was built? We've actually talked with our communities about that before. You know, can they share their GIS data with dig-safe agencies? We have done data exchanges in the past, you know, talk to gas companies and talk to electric utilities and try to exchange data. They'll exchange some, but not all. They're all required to provide this information to dig-safe sources. But those sources don't tend to come to the towns and ask for that data. I think that as towns develop more and more of this fairly accurate information, more of that should be happening.
Okay. Bill, do
Kevin,
you
on
have
the, back to the reporting component we were talking about, is that something that requires some additional training for our folks, or is it just a matter of them making the determination of what they're going to do and how they're going to do it?
Well, I think, yeah, it's at their disposal. It's not a big training issue whatsoever. But as I remember talking to you on the phone, one of the thoughts I had was that we might provide access to these reports to just more people, maybe some admin folks in public works, so that we don't take an engineer's time to do it. Someone, you know, that handles the phones or whatever can run a report in a minute or two and then fire it off to who it needs, and we're good to go. They come out as PDFs. And if you have like, I'll have to take a look, you know, as we develop our software, we have different versions of our software. And so I'll have to see what version you guys are at, but I saw the reports in there earlier today. So it takes someone to be tasked with generating this report, firing it off, and attaching it to an email and getting it to you guys.
Okay. And after the, you know, we do the pieces as regards to mapping the assets.
Sure.
What would be the step after that?
That's a good question. I think at that point, it's you start to get prepared for planning. And in the entire country, New England has the hardest time doing this, and because they have the oldest assets, but they also are significantly behind the rest of the country in doing this. And so our clients, you know, we have, you asked me this the other day, but I think we have 90 or so communities doing asset management with our software, all of them in New England, and Massachusetts being our most popular state. And so not many of them are doing this planning stage, but all of them are coming to us and they're ready. They're finally ready. And so what planning means is that every asset that you have, you assign it a useful life, and you know you have to enter information for when it was installed. This is difficult for a lot of towns because When were all of your manholes installed? When were all of your hydrants installed? And so this can be difficult, but that's the next step. Understanding what the starting point is for all of your assets, and then forecasting what the end point is. Hydrants have a certain useful life, as do precast or brick manholes or what have you. So once you get that work done, your department will now be able to look at the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years and start to forecast your significant capital expenses on replacing aging infrastructure. This is, in New England, this has all been like, when something breaks, we fix it. But New England is catching up. And it's like, well, in the next 5 years, next 10, 15 years, these are the kinds of costs we're looking at. What might we do for preventative maintenance to try to bring those costs down? And that is quickly becoming the game that Public Works is trying to play, is trying to get ahead of the cost curve as opposed to reacting to it. But you can't get there at all with the state of the practice where you're at now. We don't have the assets mapped to begin with.
Understood. So I'm good, Leo. So far, all my questions have been answered.
Rosemary?
Yeah, so, hey, Kevin, I didn't even know that we had people GIS since the last meeting. So, I'm not familiar with it. So I'm just going to get some basic information. So when I'm looking at your webpage, you advertise Simplicity Base Public Works Permits and Licensing. Which module do we have?
You have components of our Public Works tools, specifically focused on work orders.
Okay, so when I go to Public Works, we have work orders. Do we have quick asset yet?
I don't believe so.
Do we have sewer, water, stormwater, or streets?
No,
No.
because those assets aren't mapped yet.
Okay, so if we were to map these assets, right? We're capable of doing that with what we've already purchased, right?
Capable of doing what? Of mapping?
Mapping the assets.
No, you would want to get the quick asset software and the GPS equipment that I mentioned and some training, and then you could map these assets. And like I said, some of our towns, I would say half of our towns hire this work out.
Yep.
Half of our towns try to do it in-house.
So let's say we just continue to purchase stuff from you guys, okay? So just for this demonstration. So we have to buy the module that's quick asset. And then we have to add on for all the other things. So once we have everything mapped, if we want to stay within People GIS, we have to be looking at, we do have sewer, we have water, obviously we have stormwater, and we have streets.
Sure.
So those 4 modules would be handy to have, right?
Yeah. They all have built-in reports specific to their industry, right? And so, for example, with your water system, it's not just a matter of what I have for water. There's tools in there for your hydrant flushing program, and there's a hydrant flushing report. That report alone, let's say in a bigger community like, I know, for example, Bellingham is just about to do their hydrant flushing program with that tool. Their community is not a whole lot different than yours. And so it doesn't take a big community to do it, but when they do their hydrant flushing report, that report alone will be 60 pages long. And the state can come on and site and say, I need to see your hydrant flushing report, and you'll be able to generate it in a minute. And a lot of towns struggle with that kind of reporting, but our modules include all of that. And so it takes a lot of that handiwork away that you might do with spreadsheets.
So when you're talking about adding these modules on, is there a cost savings by adding on like a package of like sewer, water, stormwater? Bundle them all together and it's cheaper
yeah.
than buying them all individually, or?
Once we get to a certain number of suites,
Yep.
then we start to reduce the price. And that's a population-based model because you're right. Your point is that we cover a lot of ground, and at some point we've kind of gotten to a size where it starts, there's a diminishing return on investment. And so, yeah, at some point, the cost of the suites goes down because a client has invested in our entire width of offerings. We have 15 communities that have every suite we've got. And are they getting a little bit better price? They are, because of that.
So you mentioned Sudbury.
Sure.
So Sudbury has C-Click-Fix.
I believe that they do, yes.
They do. I'm actually looking at it.
Yep.
They have People GIS, and
Yep.
they have the website reporting feature for potholes and that sort of stuff. It says report a pothole. You can either email us at dpw@town.sudbury.ma.us or call this number. So they're doing both.
Yep.
Did you integrate with their C-Click-Fix? Probably not, since you didn't know that they had it.
Well, first of all, we have 130 clients, so I
Yeah.
don't know what they're all doing. We have an integration with C-Click-Fix, and I believe we're probably, it's different for every town where we might do an integration with another company. With C-Click-Fix, we've integrated, I think, in 3 communities. I think Sudbury's one of them. If I remember correctly, with C-Click-Fix there, we reach out once an hour and we say, what do you got for Sudbury? And we bring it in, and we bring it into our service request database. Okay? We consider every C-Click-Fix incident to be a service request. We bring it in and we put it into our service request form. Now, our client in Sudbury can take that service request, can vet it to see if it's real. They can turn it into a work order. If they do, a message goes to C-Click-Fix, and they send it to the client. If the work order is then closed, again, we update C-Click-Fix, and C-Click-Fix tells that patron. So we have integrated with C-Click-Fix a few times. I think I can't remember the other town or 2 that we've done it. Keep in mind though, Sudbury had work orders up and running for probably, with us, 8 or 9 years before they did that. All of their assets were mapped using very similar technology and approach that I mentioned to you. So they've been with us for a dozen years or more. And so they were much more ready.
No, I was just wondering why they had both. Why did they see the need, since they have the website-based reporting? Why did they see the need to purchase C-Click-Fix or vice versa? And I'm not asking you to answer that.
Yeah.
I'm just, curious.
I think I know the answer to that. So,
Okay.
so we have a DPW board of actually at the moment 13 town engineers and commissioners and directors that we meet with quarterly, and they tell us, here's what your priorities are every quarter. One of the items on our list is, do we want to have a public phone app so that you guys don't have to go out to these other parties? And I think C-Click-Fix is one of those. There's others too, as you can imagine. And they simply have voted it down every time. They want us focused on the more meat and potatoes, the area that I talked about of forecasting the next 5, 10, 20 years. When you're even in a small community like your own, you're talking tens of millions of dollars in assets, and they really want to focus on that. They're ready finally as a region. And so it just hasn't been, we have not made the phone app our next priority. And I think Sudbury wanted to have a phone app, and they were ready for it. And there was C-Click-Fix, and it works.
Okay. Now, I'm actually on Sudbury's maps, so I can see where you have all the layers on there, and it's pretty impressive. I'm not going to lie; it really is good. I've been clicking through it, and it says right on the bottom, "Simply City by People GIS." Excuse me. Is that something that we have to purchase if we were going to go to that mapping function? Is that another module, or is that something that we already have?
I would have to take a look at your contract to see. But we already have that mapping up and running for you. There are times when a public works department comes to us and says, we need the cost to be as low as we can.
Mhm.
And so for us, of course, as you can imagine, our costs are greatly impacted by the number of people we expect are going to call with questions and needs for support. So
Right.
if it's not shared with the whole town, we can lower the cost. So Lexington, for example, their DPW purchased our stuff, but after a year, the whole town wanted it. And so I think we increased the cost by like 5% or something, and we released it to the whole town. So our mapping application is called Maps Online. And
Yep.
that can be liberated and used by all of your departments, and you could have it available to the public. It would not cost much more. Again, if that's how we structured your contract, if we lowered it to get it lower for the public works. And all of those layers would begin to work for you. I'll tell you, I'll give you a couple of caveats though. And as you can imagine, in my world, it's all about the details, right? So if we have a version of the Maps Online for, say, all of your staff and for the public to use, we would probably set up a nightly update from your assessing database. So ownership information was very current, because that's where that's something we probably wouldn't have done for just your DPW's use. But if we were going to extend it across the town, we'd probably set that updating process so that it would update every night.
Right. So Sudbury doesn't have all the layers on here. I've been clicking on and off all the options. They don't have everything, but I don't necessarily know whether this is something that would be beneficial to the public, but I can say from a land use point of view, you have all the FEMA flood zones in here. You have all the wetlands. You have all the water source protection districts on here. From a planning board, Concom point of view, this is great. So I'm just looking at it. I mean, Sudbury doesn't have all their assets on here that would be public works related. They're primarily land use.
So typically,
the way that is right now. Yeah.
Once we open the license up townwide, what I would recommend is, because you can create as many online mapping sites as you want. We don't limit that.
Right.
And so typically Concom will have their own, and they will feature their layers on top, and they will have their own color schemes and their own whatever, right? And they will use other departments' layers as they see fit, but theirs are more featured. And then planning might have their own. Public Works obviously already has their own.
Right.
Assessing would have their own. So, our objective when we go townwide is we want all these departments to recognize they can have their own online map. They can control who has access to it. They can share the layers they want to, and they can also maybe not share all the layers. For example, if I'm fooling around with a potential plausible new zoning change, that's just not information that I want everyone talking about until it's ready.
No, I agree. I just, it's on their town website. It's just interesting when I looked at it.
You'll see that most of our town websites that you have access to, you're looking at their public site.
Yeah.
And it's just going to have data that they deemed appropriate for the public. In Sudbury, they probably have 150 mapping layers by now. I have one town with over 250. And so that can't fit on one map, as you can imagine. It's too much of a legend. But it's because all their departments are just building more and more layers all the time.
Right. I mean, they have on their page, they have at least 2 of these already online that they have. I think it's like stormwater and something else.
That's pretty common with the new MS4 regulations. We're seeing more of that, of people putting stormwater versions of the online map up there so they can show things like how you and your property relate to your outfall and things like that.
Right, yeah, so they only have 2 of them currently available on the site I'm looking at.
Sure. I remember when,
So the maps online would be, you'd have to look to see whether or not we have that capability. If not, that's an additional cost, right?
it is, but it's really not. And for example, you mentioned earlier, if you guys were to get into, say, water, sewer, and stormwater for assets, at that point, I know that the public maps online and the maps online license townwide at that point are 0. That's one of the ways we save costs. As a town grows with our technology, we start to forgive the base costs because they're using our suites more. Does that make sense?
Yep, nope, it does. I don't have anything else. Did I miss anything?
I think you covered it all.
I think I'm good.
Anybody else?
I do want to reiterate, your department did great with the software. I asked how many phone calls that they had made to us, and it was very few. Some of our towns will drive us nuts, as you can imagine, but your guys didn't. They had questions up front. All their questions were dated, and they've been very smooth since. So they deserve a bit of credit for that. We don't always get such a smooth launch.
See, those are the things I like to hear. So when I get the criticisms, I can come back and say they're doing a good job.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, I think they deserve that kudo. They've earned it.
Okay. Very good. I guess that takes care of our questions for tonight. I want to thank you, Kevin, for coming and addressing all of these things to us.
Yeah, let us know what you need, and we'll see what the next steps are.
You may get some more questions though, because Steve's going to be leaving us next month. So there's going to be some new people.
I understand that.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Kevin.
Kevin.
All right, you have a good night, everyone.
You too.
All right. Now we move on to a liquor license change of management for the American Legion. I see the name Scott Waymeyer. Am I to assume he's the new manager, Mary?
That is correct. They have put in an application which goes through our local licensing authority, then off to the ABCC. I did verify the name with Police Chief Barrett, no issues there. So we're just looking for a recommendation to move it forward to the ABCC in Boston.
Okay. Any discussion? If none, can I get a motion?
I'll give you a motion. I move that the Ashburnham Board of Selectmen make a change of manager to Scott Waymeyer at the American Legion official.
I'll second that.
All in favor, Leo Jansen, yes.
Rosemary Meissner, yes.
Bill Johnson, yes.
All
Thank
right.
you. I'll just need 2 of you to come in and sign at some point before I send it into the ABCC.
Okay.
Thank you.
Now, annual town meeting. I'm going to let you address this, Brian.
Sure. So, the annual town meeting is scheduled for May 4th, 2021. So all internal warrant articles and or citizens petitions are due on April 1st, 2021 by noon PM. That will give us enough time to get it, have it gone through legal, gone through advisory, capital, Board of Selectmen if needed, and make all the timelines before the annual town meeting.
Okay. Now, if I remember right, we as a board have to open the warrant and then we're going to close the warrant. So that would be, we would be opening the warrant as of this date.
That is,
And the warrant will be closing as of April 1st.
that is correct.
Okay. Any discussion?
So I have a question. Do we want to open and vote to open it and vote to close it at the same time? Or do we make the motion to close it back around more closer to the time it's going to actually close.
Yeah, I think that probably makes a little more sense. We have,
I think you can make a motion to open the warrant articles with the deadline date of, because your next meeting isn't until April 5th.
that's what I'm looking at right now. So how does that sound, Bill, if we open the warrant as of today? And,
Yeah, I think that makes sense. So I'll give you a motion to open the warrant for the annual town meeting on May 4th, effective immediately.
I'll second that.
all in favor, Leo Jansen's yes.
Rosemary Meisner, yes.
Bill Johnson, yes.
And should we add then that it will be closing by April 1st? Or,
Yeah, actually, that's probably not a bad idea. I should have included that in there. So maybe we could just amend the motion to include the fact that the warrant is scheduled to close on April 1st, 2021 at noon.
okay. Rosemary,
I'll
you want to?
second that.
Okay. All in favor of the amended motion, Leo Jansen's yes.
Rosemary Meisner, yes.
Bill Johnson, yes.
All right. Now I just put on the agenda grant update because I leave it to you, Rosemary, to fill in the blanks for us.
Yeah, so there are two. At the last board meeting, we talked about a grant, an affordable housing trust committee technical assistance grant. And I did not know at the time whether or not we were going to apply. We did apply, and I just heard that we were not selected. So it was a very competitive grant. They were only selecting 2 communities, and 14 applied. But they did offer, this is through the Massachusetts Housing Partnership. They did offer to provide us with a Trust Committee 101, which will be helpful as we start meeting with our Affordable Housing Trust Committee, which has already been appointed.
What is a Trust Committee 101?
So they're basically looking at, what, telling them, like what is their role? What is their mission? How they should procedurally move forward. What goals should they have? This was all part of the technical assistance grant that I had applied for, but this is just the basic level. They were going to give us a little bit more than that.
So does that mean they'll send somebody with the expertise to speak with our people? Is that
correct? That's what they implied in the email that they sent. I got it just before this meeting. So they have a intensive program for training of trustees. So she says in the email, it highlights statutes, best practices, kinds of activities that they can support, that sort of thing.
okay?
So that was that grant. And then the other one, we had a kickoff meeting for the local rapid recovery planning grant that we received from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Both Kirby Lacey, who's the chair of the Economic Development Commission, and I attended. So that was, a good 1-hour webinar. Just basically outlining what they're going to be looking at. They are going to be looking initially at the physical environment of our downtown, looking at things like the existence of sidewalk and street conditions, whether or not we have any amenities downtown like murals or artwork or street furniture, trash cans, things like that. Whether or not we have bike parking or bike lanes, just setting up sort of the baseline for us. And then they're going to be conducting a business survey with all the downtown businesses. There are two companies will be working with. Street Sense is doing a lot of the background work. And then another facilitator, I think their name is Fine Point, is going to be doing the business survey. So the results of these two look-sees that are downtown business district will also touch on regulatory, zoning, and permitting conditions within Ashburnham, which will help us with our bylaw review committee. And the ultimate goal for this will be to obviously increase and attract new visitors with an emphasis of helping our local businesses to recover. By participating in this program, it does set us up to receive future funding.
So this is like one of those planning grants that we need, like step one.
Well, they will give us, the actual report will give us action items that we can do as a community. Some of them will cost us nothing. Some of them are things that we probably want to look at working on over 3 to 5 years. And those longer term goals might require costs, and we'll be able to reach back to this plan. And as we apply for, let's say, the Mass Downtown Initiative, which is a grant, we can say that we participated in the LRRP process, and this was an identified action item for us. So yeah, so it gives us a little bit more, we'll probably score higher on our grant application. But yeah, you know how it works. You know, the more legwork you put in and community support that you have, they like the idea of a community-driven project. They did speak about the importance of the expression of interest. That's another action item, grant action item that economic development is going to be talking about tomorrow evening at their meeting. That is something that's now required for many of the grants, that if we were to take this plan and apply for funding for other recommended projects, we would have to complete these expression of interest in order to be eligible. So they made that very clear.
So that's a little bit of what I touched on in the report that I sent you guys.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. But Kirby and I walked away. We're very hopeful about this grant. Ashburnham, just a little anecdotally, Ashburnham was the only community in our area who applied for and was awarded an LRRP planning grant.
That puts us one step ahead of some of the competition.
Well, let's hope.
Yes.
That's all I had.
Okay. Any questions for that, Bill? Okay. Bill, you're muted.
I'm all set.
Okay. Now we will go down to approval of minutes for March 1st of 2021.
Mr. Chairman, I give you a motion to move the minutes of Monday, March 1st, 2021 as written.
I'll second that.
All in favor? Leo Jansen's yes.
Rosemary Meissner, yes.
Bill Johnson, yes.
Okay. Do we have any other business this evening?
I don't have anything.
Okay. Brian, anything that we should have covered that we haven't?
No, I think we covered everything I had. Thank you.
Okay. Rosemary?
Nope, I'm good.
All right. And now we're going to be moving on to reminders, and we go to you, Mr. Johnson.
The next Board of Selectmen's meeting will be on Monday, April 5th, 2021 at 6:30 PM, and that will be a Zoom meeting. And on April 27th, 2021, town elections will be held at the J.R. Briggs Elementary School. Back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, seeing the town election thing, as a board, we were tasked to be part of the group to try to get somebody to run for the planning board. Rosemary, I know you had conversation with somebody. Did that person choose to run?
Yes, they did. So it's Steve Coswell. I don't know if anybody else did. I had also had conversations with Jack McCarthy, and he declined after thinking it over. But Steve Coswell, I believe, Mary, did he submit his paperwork?
He did, yep. They were, all the signatures were verified, so he will be on the ballot.
Excellent. So all of the ballot positions have a name.
Yes.
Okay. Very good. I have nothing else, so it looks like we have one more motion.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
All in favor, Leo Jansen's yes.
Rosemary Meissner, yes.
Bill Johnson, yes.
Mark your calendars because we did this in an hour.
That's right.
Good night, everyone.
Good
Good
night.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank
Good night.
you.
Bye-bye.